Today, we are here to break down the best decks from the Disney Lorcana Challenge in Seattle. A lot of highs, a lot of lows, a lot of hills for anyone that was there and know what I'm talking about while you're walking around the city. But in all honesty, this was a great tournament, won by a great player, and I can't wait to break down all these decks. Let's get into it. Here we are looking at the top 64 decks from DLC Seattle. Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald Steel, and Amethyst Ruby were the three top decks played at this event. Amber Steel coming in on fourth, Sapphire Steel, Amethyst Emerald, Amber Emerald, Amethyst Amber, and Amethyst Steel, all making an appearance in some ways to make an impact on, of course, the top 64. Now, what I find most interesting about this particular list here is that the idea at the end of the day is we just looked at last week where we covered the Lorca Quest. And in the Lorca Quest, the top three decks were Ruby Sapphire, Amber Steel, and Amethyst Emerald. Amethyst Emerald fell way off, and I really think that this is a EU versus NA thing. I think that the EU players very much love that deck. They like the style of it. They like the play of it. And we are very much well more in favor of Ruby Amethyst and, of course, Emerald Steel. Although Emerald Steel won Lorca Quest, it won DLC Vegas, it now won DLC Seattle. That deck still wasn't played in very high numbers over the last several weeks, where this time came in, was played as one of the higher numbers in the event, and it was the most successful deck, of course, in day two. Again, having the third, large tournament in a row. You're talking two 2,000 player tournaments and now a 600 or 700 player tournament in Lorca Quest, all having the same deck, or a version of the same deck be successful and get a win. So let's break down the decks that were successful that we're seeing on this list now. Top 64 finisher Chris Becker playing Amber Amethyst Aggro. This deck is pedal to the metal, and in all honesty, probably took advantage of Ruby Sapphire and Amethyst Ruby all day long. It would not shock me at all if we were able to just bet against the steel decks and pray for the matchup wheel. That's my experience with this list. Nothing crazy here. Nothing, kind of brand new. The 2-cost Maleficent is just another 2-lore character that we're adding to the deck as another way to close out games. But, in all honesty, it's a very straightforward gain lore deck. This one is playing Friends on the Other Side still and playing Amethyst Chronicon 4 ofs. And, of course, the 4 of Gathering Knowledge and Wisdom. But really, this is just put my characters in play, turn them sideways, force my opponent to answer always, and see if they're even able to do that. And in most cases, it's very difficult for some of the non-steel decks to keep up with you. And even some of the other aggro decks that aren't steel, this deck might just be able to overrun them too from the play or draw position. Huge shout out to Chris. Congratulations on your top 64 finish. Another aggro deck in the mix here, a little bit more mid-rangey with the higher end costing cards such as Chernobog and Clarabelle, along with Shift Pegasus and Shift Queen. This is a deck that we have seen come out and be successful every now and then, kind of showcase the power and the speed of this list, and of course the draw ability of Clarabelle to refresh your hand and kind of force your opponent to answer things in a weird ways, specifically with higher willpower cards or more annoying cards. Rapunzel being able to replenish your hand through draw, along with Sven being able to ready cards like Piglet, your bodyguards coming in as key components when necessary. As we can see, this list isn't relying on bodyguards, but it's most likely setting them up later in the game to protect your more important characters. All in all, Gabrielle here was able to play very well, find their way into a top 64 finish. And this combination might just be one of those that we've now seen multiple layers of. We've seen the songs version continues to be successful. We've now seen this aggro version continue to be successful. Moving into the Azurite Sea, I'm curious on what this will start to look like and how this will mold and adapt moving forward. Here we are with another top 64 deck played by Aubrey Perry. This was the one of 2 Emerald Amethyst decks that were able to find their way into the top 64. And in all honesty, this was a deck that was labeled as other in terms of overall meta breakdown on day one. This was not a heavily played deck whatsoever. I think there was maybe less than 50 of these registered to the tournament. And because of that, the idea that any of them got into the day 2 is kind of impressive in itself. But here we are again, looking at another version of this. This version's a little more consistent, I think, against opposing Diablo decks, having 2 Serhis, having 4 Kid Cloud Kickers, having 4 Elsa the Fifth Spirit, having the answers to the Emerald Diablos is really the most important part here. I think the reason why most players are choosing Ruby Amethyst or choosing Emerald Steel over this is because they have direct answers to Diablos, and that's kind of the most important card to answer within the metagame. This deck doesn't even have Coves. So without Cove, we are very reliant on Serhis as an answer to Diablo. And I think that that could be the #1 reason why this deck's success in a world where Diablo and Emerald Steel are so prevalent could find even more issues within the Disney Lorcana metagame. And huge shout out to the top 64 finish. I still think that this deck is not very well positioned in the metagame whatsoever. I don't think it's necessarily fast enough to beat Red Blue. I don't think it's necessarily great into the opposing Emerald Steel meta. I think Amber Steel is also still a very bad matchup. So while this deck has seen success, I really am just curious on what type of success we're going to see from this moving forward. Yet another set of Disney Lorcana. Homero Sanchez finished in the top 64 with the Amethyst Steel aggro Doc deck. This was a deck that we had played in Vegas, talked about a bunch since, wrote a Menify for, and continued to kind of grow this deck moving forward. Homero took, honestly, the version from Vegas and only slightly modified it. Did not change a whole bunch of different things with it. Kind of just tweaked the numbers a little bit here and there to make it a little more favorable in the matchups he was worried about. And really the biggest addition is Merlin Crab. Aside from Merlin Crab, deck is very straightforward. Deck is still doing everything that you want it to do. Still very powerful. Still has incredibly free matchups into Ruby Sapphire and Ruby Amethyst. Adding the extra smash, the third Mickey, cutting down on certain cards makes it more interesting because they are prevalent as well in certain matchups. But all in all, we really understood, like, this is the deck that I want to play to be successful into a specific metagame that I believe in. And obviously it worked out. It was very successful. Ended up losing in top 64 to Emerald Steel on the draw, of course. It was a 2-1 matchup against Zan. So it might have been a bad pairing in day 2, but this is a deck that if I had been successful with it and went into a day 2 in a higher seeding, I would have felt really confident about this deck. If you were on the other side of the top 32, kind of being on the play in games makes this deck feel much more powerful. Being on the draw, it's a little more tough, specifically in all the Steel matchups that were in Seattle. But all in all, huge shout out to Homero getting in there to the day 2, showcasing to everyone that Doc is a real card and it should be respected. Speaking of that Amethyst Steel Metafy guy, it's official, it's out, and it's been even more added on to. With each and every addition to the metagame, we are going to be looking to continuously update our Amethyst Steel aggro guide. Just recently, I put in there the deck list that Dick was successful with from the Friday competitive event. He was able to pick up a top 32 finish and win another 75 tickets, picking up even more Rapunzels. I actually tried to play this deck as well. That'll be a story for a podcast when I make fun of myself a bunch because how dumb I can be. That's okay. We move on with life. But in all honesty, the deck has been great. It's been successful. And moving into Azerite Sea, it's going to get even more tools, even more power. So we're going to continue to update this guide for, honestly, forever and ever, as long as we believe it will remain meta relevant within Lorcana. So if you want to check out this guide, learn a little bit more about the, ins and outs of the choices that made for our deck building for this list, then you should check out this guide. The link will be in the pinned comments or the description below. Let's look at the rest of the decks. Huge shout out here to Vatatis. I might have said your name wrong. I'm very, very sorry for that. This was my round 9 opponent. Ended up finishing in the top 64 with Sapphire Steel. It was without a doubt the one matchup that I did not want to see in my round 9. I think it was a very difficult matchup. I think I played probably the best match I had played all day in it. We had a game 1 that went, I think, around 35 minutes. It was an absolute grind. I had to have everything go in my favor and really hope that my opponent just couldn't get there. And in the end, I was able to get myself to 19 lore. I didn't even actually make the quest because it was irrelevant. I couldn't finish the game and win, but I could have gotten to 19 lore because the final crab was able to come down and pick up the win and secure him a day 2 position. This deck was really cool, really interesting, very well played by a very great player. And it's just one of those things that I wanted to showcase here as another top 64 finish. Congratulations to you, and really sorry to hear that you couldn't take it any further into a top 32 or getting that Continentals invite. Jacob Schmidt picked up a top 8 at the DLC Seattle. This exact same list also took a top 8 in the Sunday competitive tournament. So showcasing its power, and realists showcasing that, hey, I am not going to lose the Emerald Steel at all. I'm going to commit 3 Queen of Hearts, 4 Chicha, which I love. I also love the interaction that this has with Daisy Duck. Turn 1 Daisy Duck, is pretty powerful in Disney Lorcana. But if we have a turn 2 Chicha, and all of a sudden now on turn 3, we have 4 Sisu or 3 Queen of Hearts that interact with Daisy Ducks, it's phenomenal. It'll definitely catch people off guard, put it back a little bit in your favor. This deck does ramp a little slower with no Tipu and no 1 jump ahead, but that's not really the goal. It's much more of the goal of understanding that Fishbone Quill and Greatstone Dragon is going to pick you up a bunch of ink and resources, and it's going to give you that end game that you're going to want and need anyway. Donald Duck also is kind of a bridge to it as well, which is more or less of choosing the 3-5 setup rather than the 2-4 setup. Having Fishbone Quill into Donald puts you onto a 7 ink on turn 5. And that is just saying, like, it's okay for me to be a little bit slower if I have Queen of Hearts and I have Sisu as ways to interact with the board early, specifically in combination with Chicha. Also, Chicha gives you another draw engine to this deck. Very often we are so reliant on Popsicle, on Hyrim, on Tamatoa that we need to see those cards to ever really stay in the game. Chicha is offering another way to kind of just focus a little bit subtle, more draw, and kind of just get you through to finding your visions and finding your Hyrims and just helping you find your way through your deck to toolbox it through to have a more consistent game state. Deck played very well, finished in the top 8 here of the DLC, and Dave Solberg took this to a top 8, finishing 5th actually in seeding in the Sunday competitive event as well. Michael Majors took this to a top 4 finish for Ruby Amethyst. This list, very interesting. We've seen it kind of over the last couple weeks, flip-flop on choices of whether we should be playing locations. Should we be playing Finders Keepers? Should we not be playing any Be Prepareds? Or should we be playing Sisus? Things like that. This deck has gone through a true evolution over the last couple weeks with the choices that it's had. And most believe that it has a limited choice pool, in the Amethyst Ruby toolbox. But we've now seen this kind of up and down and all around versions of the evolutions of this list within this metagame. Finishing in the top 4, and it was one of 2 Ruby Amethysts that did finish in the top 4, might I add. This list had the choice of 1 Library, 4 Queen's Castle, 3 Finders Keepers, 1 Elsa, still 4 Maui, and then, of course, Lady Tremaine making her way back into this deck list. For a very long time, the card really didn't seem like the correct play, but this past weekend, single targeting out things, giving a better matchup against Ruby Sapphire. I think put this deck in a much better winning position overall. When we look at this list, we'll say, all right, we have our 4 Brawl and we have our 1 Elsa. That is the only answers realistically to Diablo. I think for me, I just can't do that anymore. And it's the one thing that I absolutely would look to do moving forward. Knowing how prevalent Diablo has been, having only 5 answers to it, I just don't think it's enough. I think we need to commit a little bit more of our deck building toward it. It's not the reason why Michael lost at all, as he lost to Amber Steel in the top 4, but it's definitely cards like Elsa and Brawl that are so successful in that matchup and that can keep in check very often, that finding other answers to Diablo, I think, will be the key way for this deck to remain on top in general, because when a Diablo goes off and draws too many cards, then it kind of gets out of hand, and all of your consistent draw power later in the game is just matched by a Diablo. Huge shout out again to Michael for a top 4 finish. Sean here took 2nd place in the DLC Seattle as well. Playing a very traditional Amber Steel list. Honestly, the only real change is going back to Gaston, which is a Singer 5, which is just an additional Singer 5 here that has 3 strength, so it can't be brawled and can't be Sisu'd, has a little more sturdy to them, does not find a card like Ariel does, but in all honesty, that's the only real change here. Amber Steel, another deck that's kind of been up and down a little bit. We've seen aggro versions be successful. We've seen song versions be successful. Robin Hood or the Queen, all of these different lists are just showcasing the real truth to the strength that is the Amber Steel in combination, having so many tools to utilize. And this one was just saying, I just want my 3 willpower characters and I want them as quickly as possible. I want to set up really big, impactful turn 5 plays. And in this world where, we're not playing against Emerald all the time, or we're just kind of relying on drawing our songs on curve, turn 3 Gaston into turn 4 Prince Naveen can lead to refilling your hand and then also being able to play whatever card you want off your Gaston. So having Ariel and Gaston is almost just like having 6 Ariels, 2 of which just don't draw you a card. I think that was the plan for this particular list on this day, and understanding that we still need Daisy Ducks to win early. No Piglets this time, but we have Ursula Vanessa's. We still have the 4-piece, 3 Laurens. There's just a lot of really good things happening here. The Baloo is probably the one card that stands out the most. I'm not sure if this deck at all needs Baloo, but putting it in play against most decks does represent 2 lore. There's not many answers to kind of getting him off the field. However, even in Emerald Steel matchups, they can just muses it back to your hand and things like that. Kit Cloudkirker also comes to mind that can just muse it and kind of get rid of it. So there's a lot of ways around this card that I don't know if it's the best card for this particular list. And I do understand wanting a bodyguard and having one that gains you additional lore, which I think is great. I just think that the cost of it, having an inkable Donald that gives you 1 lore upon quest rather than 2 lore upon banish, I think would be a safer and more inkable direction. So you give a little more choice within your gameplay. All in all, huge shout out to Sean and a great run to the finals. Last and finally, shout out to Luke Goldwyn, also known as Wonderland, picking up the first place finish at DLC Seattle for Team Labyrinth. This list was perfect in the end. It played so well. It did everything you wanted to do. It had all the answers that you wanted to. It even respected Diablo a little bit more, playing a card like Baboom, playing 2 of the Hidden Coves. Only 3 Peats was a little crazy to me. I just think the card's so good. I think a lot of people will also look at the one-ofs in this list, saying there was a one-of Doc. Shout out to Wonderland. We are both huge Doc fans, and I think that we just couldn't play a tournament without him. I also played Doc in my Emerald Steel list as a one-of. He was incredible. If anyone watching the finals had seen that Wonderland was actually able to play Doc twice, muse him back to his hand twice, and then played a 3rd time to draw cards. His opponent actually picked up the card in the finals and read it, which was phenomenal. The card just so very good. And in all honesty, this deck was great. Deck was played very well. It's not a very easy deck to play, even though it showed a bunch of success from a bunch of different players. It was one of the more successful decks to make a day 2 conversion. Anyone watching the tournament and really watching the top 8 or the top 16 and down and seeing Luke's play, you can tell that there's so many decisions that have to be made on every given turn. And in order to win games, you have to make a lot of them correct. Luke played phenomenal, did great, and was able to pick up a win. And honestly, I couldn't be more happy. DLC Seattle has come to pass. This was a quick one. At the end of the day, this is the end of the Shimmering Skies metagame. There's 2 more weeks left of it, but no set champs, no big tournaments to look forward to. So we're on our path to the Azerite Sea. I wanted to just get out there, get the information, showcase some of these decks, and maybe spark some ideas for the Azerite Sea metagame. The one thing I'd like to say about the metagame is that from now on, we do have a Metafy. And on our Metafy, David Nunez is going to be writing his meta predictions for big events coming up. So right now, we don't have anything coming in November, but in December, we have DLC Paris, we have the Continentals in Paris for EU, and we also have the CCS 8K. Both of those events are going to be events that we are very much focused on and targeting. So with that, we are going to be still continuously updating our MetaFi on metagame predictions. It's going to help all players as they approach any tournament for their weekly levels, or even for us. You're going to see in the description below, we're going to have a tournament coming up on the 16th of November, which is a 1.5K. It's going to be the first constructed tournament for Azurite Sea. And in that tournament, you're going to start seeing all of the decks from the early goings of the thought process of the Forbidden Mountain team. We're going to have, I think, 8 or 9 members of the Forbidden Mountain in the tournament. We're hoping that we can cap the event at 48 players. And we're going to be streaming the entire thing here and on Twitch, so you guys are going to be able to see all of that. Of course, after that, the day after that, we're also going to be having another boot camp like we did for the set champs in August or in July, when we kind of got together, did a whole boot camp, showcase a bunch of different decks. We're going to do the exact same thing, but this time, first weekend of Azurite Sea, going to get together, going to showcase a bunch of decks and really kind of just kickstart people's thought processes on Azurite Sea, showcasing what some of the decks that we want to attack early on and things like that. But all in all, I really just want to showcase that, like, hey, if you want to be a part of the metagame here, yes, I report on the past. Sometimes I do a little bit of prediction of future, but from now on, all that prediction on the future, if you want to be up to date and kind of see where our head's at, how we like really go through the information, use it to plan for our own tournaments, you're going to have to check out the MetaFi in the pin comment below or the description of this video. All in all, I'd like to finish this with some thank yous for the year. 6 Disney Lorcana challenges. I don't even have my badges on me right now, in all honesty. I think it would be nice to have them, but we don't. We're recording and I kind of forgot about them. And I had a blast this year. You know, when the team started, it was right after SCG Hartford. I started having conversations with some new players, building relationships, and wanted to bring them in and have them be a part of this. And through that time, we have now ventured into 6 different cities, had dinners, had lunches, had moments that I will never forget, sitting there watching my team, you know, be successful in the game, complete their goals has always been, you know, my true intent of starting the team to begin with. Yes, I would have loved to be successful for myself. I was banished in round 9 I lost my first game, which prevented me knowing very well that I could not get to a position that could make day 2. I played a really tough matchup so I wasn't able to get there. I wasn't able to win, and my day was ended. And although I had 3 44-point finishes in previous tournaments, 41 points in this event, my season was great, but it really wasn't what I was hoping for. I would have loved to have been more successful, but, you know, that's card games. At the end of the day, I can win, 3, 4, 5, 6 set championships or whatever the number has been this year. That's great. It can prove that I can be successful at their level, but it also proves that at another level, it's another tournament, it's another day, and sometimes it's not your day. And that's really what it was in Seattle. I played the game as probably almost as perfectly as I could. I could have maybe done 1 or 2 things very differently that maybe ends up in my favor, but the truth is that it's very difficult to make those distinctions when you can't go back and watch them and you can't take notes or anything like that. So you're not allowed to remind yourself to think about something later. All in all, the point I'm trying to get through is these tournaments they're hard, they're difficult. 64 players from 2000 is near perfect in these events. So anyone making those day 2, they definitely played as good as they could. They probably got a little lucky, if I'm being honest, along the way. And that's good. That's okay for card games. It's all right to accept those things. It's okay to say, hey, this is how I was successful on a given day. There were players that only made 1 top 64 that attended only 1 of them. There were players that only made 1 top 64 that went to all 6 of them. There are players that, like David Nunes, finished in 2nd place of Toronto and then started 06 in Seattle. Those things happen. That's card tournament life. So if you're kind of upset about your finish, if you're not, feeling that great about yourself, just know that it's every tournament is a new tournament. And yeah, it sucks that we don't know what the LCQ system is for Continentals. And yeah, it sucks we don't know when the next DLC is. And maybe Seattle was your last chance. But in all honesty, it's okay. 1% of players in Disney Lorcana registered have an invite to Continentals. It was the bar was as high, almost as high as it can be for the average player. So because of that, you know, I can sit here, I can be really upset with myself, I can beat myself up, or I can do the other thing where I just turn the page, start going with Azerite C, put myself in the best position to be successful in an LCQ if I can manage to get into one. All in all, at the end of the day, DLCs were a blast. I'm so glad to have been able to say that I was able to play in 6 of them, represent TFM, enjoy the atmosphere, enjoy the community. A huge shout out and thank you for all of you being honestly so very welcoming. Whether it was a photo, whether it was a fist bump, whether it was just a thank you, signing of a card, all of it. I truly did appreciate every single experience that I had over the last 6 months in any of those. And I thank you very much for kind of just accepting me for the work that I do, for the work that we do as a team here at TFM, the content team. Huge shout out to Scott and Melissa that honestly for the last several months have really helped me create things and helped me move forward. Shout out to Nunez and Dick that have now officially joined the content team. You're going to be seeing a lot more of their work over on the Metafy and things like that. And just a shout out to my team in general for being there, making these events even more fun and more loving towards one another. It really has been a blast. Thank you so much for watching today. A huge congratulations to my good friend Wonderland and Luke. We had a wonderful lunch on Friday where we went out to lunch and a walk. We were together for about 3 hours. We talked life. We talked Lorcana. We talked content. And to know that I was able to spend that day with him, spend that time with him, have those conversations, and then 2 days later, he's winning a DLC challenge. I couldn't have been happier for anyone else. So honestly, congratulations to you again, sir. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and we will catch you in the next one.